Good morning to Asia, good afternoon to the Pacific, and good evening to the US and Latin America. It's my great pleasure to welcome all of you to the APRU Multi-Hazard Webinar Series, second session of looking ahead to the second decade of recovery after the GEJET. This webinar is organized by the Association of Pacific Rim Universities, APRU Multi-Hazard Program, and the International Research Institute of Disaster Science, IRADIS, Tohoku University in Japan. I'm Takako Izumi, Associate Professor of Tohoku University and the Program Director of APRU Multi-Hazards Program. Following the previous session, we will focus on the recovery efforts after the Great East Japan Earthquake and tsunami occurred in March 2011 that claimed nearly 20,000 fatalities. Last week, Professor Egawa highlighted the need for a DRR strategy with a wider scope, including different types of hazards and the importance of inclusivity in the DRR process, especially consideration on elderly people. Dr. Mali highlighted that the recovery issues are sustainable community issues, such as livelihood and economy. This session invites two speakers from IRADIS Tohoku University. Professor Yuichi Ono, 2030 Global DRR Agenda Office, and Dr. Yulia Gersten, Disaster Culture and Archives Study. They will share with us their experience related to GEJET through their research and study. I believe that we could learn about what the current recovery situation and the challenges, and then how we could contribute to the ongoing recovery efforts. While you're listening to the presentations, please do not forget to send us your questions using the Q&A function. After each presentation, we will have Q&A session to answer those questions. So now I'd like to introduce and welcome the first speaker, Professor Yuichi Ono. He is a geographer and a climatologist specialized in wind-related disasters such as tornadoes. He is also keen to international disaster risk reduction policies. He has been involved in international disaster risk reduction policy development at the World Meteorological Organization, the United Nations International Strategy for Disaster Reduction, and the UN ESCAP in Bangkok. So he also serves the director of the Global Center for Disaster Statistics, a joint initiative with the UNDP. I understand he will speak today about his new project of World Bosai Forum, World Bosai Walk Tohoku Plus 10. So let's hear it together. So I'm really looking forward to your presentation, Professor Ono. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Izumi Sensei. Good morning, afternoon, evening, all. I don't look like a professor researcher today. I am going to share the activity we are taking, commemorating the 11th or 10th or 11th year of the global, Great East Japan Earthquake and Tsunami. So we are together with this Ono-kun. This is a mascot, the sock monkey, produced by the local community elderly ladies for the recovery effort. And I'm introducing this sock monkey to everywhere. So I'm just ambassador today to introduce this sock monkey for your interest. But what I will do today is to make a presentation on this World Bosai Walk. This is the Bosai means, you know, disaster risk reduction, and walk Tohoku. We are walking on the way to walk from Fukushima to Aomori for 800 kilometers, about 500 miles on foot. And I will introduce you some of the progress, some of the findings, initial findings after walking for halfway to Miyagi Prefecture, which is 400 kilometers. So we walked about 400 kilometers in 20 days since to 23rd of February. So the highlighting the findings. That's the purpose of today's my presentation. The concept of a Buildback Better is introduced as in Sendai framework, or a little bit before after the Indian Ocean tsunami. But it lacks the concrete examples definitions are found somewhere these days, but what are the concrete examples? So we are reporting on how people are working on recovery and also documenting the disaster and passing the experience and knowledge down to the future generation, and archiving the Build Back Better and disseminating knowledge and wisdom internationally. That's the scope. And the objective is similar. We are reporting, disseminating what the Build Back Better was, and creating a network of Tohoku has many disaster-related museums, especially tsunamis. And I think it's maybe 50, 40, even maybe nearly, including the monument, it can be 100 or more such objects, museums and the memorials, the stones, memorial stones, and so on. So they try to create a network of that with international communities as well, and promoting how Tohoku is a good place to visit. Now, the COVID-19 restrict travelers coming to Tohoku, not only from Japan, but abroad. So we are pointing out the beauty of Tohoku. So this is map shows what we started in Iwaki Prefecture, Iwaki City in Fukushima here. We are now about here in the Miyagi Prefecture, where Tohoku University is also located. I mean, now today in Tohoku University. And from next weekend, we will walk again from northern Miyagi Prefecture, going through Iwate Prefecture, then goal is the Aomori Hachinohe. This is the departed day of 23rd of February, and Shioyazaki Lighthouse in Fukushima. So we visited Usuiso Beach, which was hardly hit by tsunami in 2011. Then we invited a guest from Usuiso district, the local leader. He is managing the disaster restoration activities of this Usuiso Beach. And Tohoku University is conducting a project for many years in this district. So we learned his experience, his town's community's experience, and how they are recovering. And we walked around the town to hear about the recovering effort. And we also stopped by the Tomioka Archive Museum, provided a comprehensive explanation, not only the tsunami disaster, but also the history, origins of the Tomioka town. The Tomioka had all of the people evacuated from the, not only by tsunami, but also the nuclear accident, power plant accidents. So they have a severe experience soon after the disaster. The big difference between Fukushima and 3 other prefectures are that in many of the people in Fukushima could not come back to the site because of this nuclear power plant risk. So they are very different from 2 other districts. That's the voice we heard. Some guy said Fukushima is different from the other districts. That's emphasized, that indicating that Fukushima is having more difficulty in the recovery effort. And well, we also visited the inland, not just only the coastal area, but the inland village, well, Kawauchi village. Do you see the light column? This winery. This is not the Switzerland or Germany. This is Fukushima. This guy, the Mr. Kitamura, introduced white grapes to produce a white wine, and that's a recovery effort part of it. And in Futaba, which is really close to the nuclear power plant, and they have a museum now, a nuclear disaster memorial museum. And we found that this museum is the very effective way to disseminate the information. But also there was a speaker's corner for the local village people to speak up on their experience. And some are very critical about the government order or the government recommendations, but some are more or less accepting. There are many, many voices. It's not one voice. It's many kinds of voices in the Fukushima prefecture and area. Then the right side, you see this guy is talking about the experience in the Ukedo Elementary School. Everybody evacuated safely. That was a good story. But the area, the school children were saved, but the many people in the residential area were killed And this stone is memorial to describe everybody who died in district, about more than maybe 100, 200 names are here. Then he explained that, well, the firefighters, volunteer firefighters, they try to save lives after tsunami, and but they try to search survivors on the 11th of March, and they had to stop it because of the daytime is over, and still the excessive tsunami warning is still issued. So they had to retreat a little bit, but they really wanted to come back next morning to search again for the survivors. But just before, a few minutes before they start searching, there was an evacuation order because of a nuclear power plant explosion. So the firefighter couldn't come back. Then the firefighter was about to find to conduct their effort, but they couldn't. So the wording was very astonishing to me, that they were like, translating like, we couldn't do it. That kind of a voice he memorized. So that was very emotional event to us. Then we went through the Shinchi, Fukushima. This is the fisherman's village, and we talked to this. To the right picture, you see two gentlemen. The one gentleman left side is Mr. Kawashima. He used to be working with us in Irides as a professor, but he's now retired and being a fisherman. Very interesting. He goes to fishing, and every morning he wake up at 1 o'clock, and 2 o'clock he goes to the fishing, come back at 6 a.m. So, and this guy is invited him, that fisherman, local fisherman. So they talked about the experience. And this fisherman, Mr. Ono, he lost his brother in tsunami. And they were on a ship. They're going to a fishery. And as soon as they got in the boat, there was a tsunami warning. And traditionally, the boats, they are trying to be away from the coast towards the far offshore. And his boat was okay, but his brother's boat had engine problem, so his brother couldn't make it. So such stories we heard. Then earthquake remaining this elementary school in another elementary school in Miyagi Prefecture. This is a guy who showed us the evacuation effort of the school children, led by the school principal. And according to him, every student were on the rooftop, but he was not sure, the principal was not sure if this is a really safe place or not, because you can see the seashore very close, but still, he has no other option but to evacuate them on the upstairs, the vertical evacuation. Luckily, the tsunami water was just around here, so the students are not affected by tsunami severely. But his decision, it's a really tough decision to make. So those stories we heard. Okay, next. I think the time is up, so I'm going to be first. Then Natori City also having a museum, and Yuriage also having a museum. There are many small local museums, and each museum is different. Let's skip the details. But this is Arahama Elementary School. I think many of the foreign visitors are coming to the Arahama because it's in Sendai. It's close to Sendai City. And the right side is I think the Onagawa. Sorry, this is not Onagawa. The next one. So sorry, I skipped that. Then Tagajo High School, we visited, and this high school is having a special course, a disaster science course as a high school. Then they learn about the disaster discussion. They go to field work and so on. We listened to the voices from the students, and they were impressive that they work hard, and they were very aspirated to help others. That was very astonishing to me. Then Higashimatsushima City, and this is close to the tourist side, tourist attracting point called Matsushima. And also this area was also severely damaged by tsunami. And JL station, the train station, was also affected. And we listened to the voices from these local people. And this is Ono-kun's hometown in Shinomaki, Rikuzen Ono. It's Ono coming from the name of the place. And this local people, they're producing this sock monkey for recovery effort. The right picture is a monument with the Gambaro Ishinomaki, meaning that Ishinomaki is a town. The Gambaro means cheer up, let's do it, and kind of thing. So encouragement voice that was posted 1 month after tsunami, and people got really encouraged by the signboard, and which is now still on there. Then Kesenema, and we are not just having an official visit, but we did a random a non-appointment interview. This fisherman on the right side, I just talked to him he was taking a walk with dog, and he talked to us that what he experienced and what his neighbor experienced. That is a really interesting stories, and I cannot say the details, and all the information is uploaded in the website later. So the most impressive finding to me so far was the following: how come devastated people, the people with tsunami experience, who lost family members, friends, and loved ones, were able to stand up again despite this difficulty. So that was my main consideration before the walk. Then one common response from many people I found was that they had someone to take care. They were able to stand up again because they have somebody to take care. That was the common, not only one, but maybe several people responded to me like that. And one lady who were owner of the local small hotel, lost her daughter, but her grandchildren still survived. So she was so desperate, but because of this grandchildren, she was able to, stand up again, to recover, to do the business again for this remained grandchild. So that was one of the examples. We are going to, we have been already uploading the information in the website. So if you are interested, please come to this social network site, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and website, and you have more details of what we are doing. And in addition to the disseminating this information, we were launching this third World Bosai Forum. We had 17 and 19, and we were going to have it in 21, but due to the COVID-19, we postponed it. So it'll be a 23rd in Sendai, again, Friday, March 10th to March 13th next year. So if you have time, you're welcome to visit Sendai and to attend this World Bosai Forum. And we will make also a study tour, excursion to the tsunami affected areas. And well, some of the information are here. I will send this, share this information to you through APRU network. The 4-day meeting, and in the past, several thousand people came, and there are many interesting. So if you have any question, please contact us, and I will finish my presentation. Thank you, Takako-sensei.
Thank you very much, Ono-sensei. And I think we all enjoyed your presentation and with a lot of photos. So, okay, first of all, we have already a question from the audience. And you mentioned emotional recovery was about emotional recovery on your first slide. So may we know more about the initiatives done towards promoting emotional recovery?
Yes, thank you for this question. The structural measures and non-structural measures, those are maybe two types of a category in disaster risk reduction recovery. Building the dikes, seawalls, and so on, and also disaster education, public awareness, early warning system as a non-structural. So that either structural or non-structural, and we are also finding that the importance of how to deal with the people's hurt, people's mind hurt inside of the people. Without recovering the mind or hurt of the people, the other activities may be hindered. So we think it's very important to how people could recover personally emotionally from the disaster. And I don't think there's a concrete and complete perfect solution for that. But there's a way of treatment by the psychiatrists and the doctors, medical doctors. They have some treatment, but that has also limitation. And one thing I found was that when they were speaking up what happened to others, that is already the good sign of emotional recovery. If people were hiding that from the what happened to others, then they were keep having this difficulty, and maybe the symptoms is not going to be better. So I think someone to talk to them, someone to visit them. But well, some people were communicative and talk back right after, but some people were left, isolated. So that's how to knock the door and open the heart of those people. That's a challenge. And from this work, I found, I heard of those voices, but I don't have a perfect solution for that. But the community level activities, I think, and someone to believe, if you have someone to trust, then that person may be able to open up. But that is, I think, only the key to get into such deep level of emotion. And also I mentioned it's an important thing, but the reality is very difficult to access to those people's mindness. So that's my limitation. I think I have to give up for other solutions for this. But talking to your loved ones, somebody who is maybe one open door to the solution. That's something I can tell. So yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Ono. And also by visiting all these affected areas, I'm sure you found some common challenges in these areas about the recovery efforts. Yes. So what did you see the common problems and issues in the field?
Yes. Yes. I think I maybe share the two things. One, the government built very high seawalls, tsunami seawalls, all along the Tohoku area. Then, especially in Miyagi Prefecture, the Rias Coast, the very complicated area. For the geographically lagged coastline area, the tsunami height is pretty high. So some people support the high seawall, but some fishermen or some local people didn't like high seawall, so tried to make it lower. So there was a struggle, and the coordination was very tough. How to have one voice, and government, local government, Miyagi Prefecture or the city government, they have to make a decision on some level. But that process is time consuming. And immediately after tsunami in 2011, more people were supporting the higher seawalls. But years later and later, year passing, many more voices to lower the height of the seawall. That's not easy, and somebody had to make a decision somewhere in there. But there's some voices, like one community, only one family lives in this Kesenema community, and one area, one beach, one family. But enormous amount of money, Goku, the big money was used for making a seawall for one family. Is that suitable or not? That was a question raised by somebody. So for the populated area, maybe seawalls may be a good solution. But if there's nobody living, just agricultural field or just no houses, whether we should build a seawall or not, that's I think that we have to look into more for the future generation. That's one thing. The second thing is a disaster memorial in not only Miyagi Prefecture but other areas. Whether remnants of the like a damaged school buildings or damaged some object, whether they should be remained as a memorial for the future generation for education or not. That also an issue. Then I we had one guest, Professor Hirakawa. He joined us for the work, and he suggested, he was a committee member of making a decision on this remaining remnants of the disaster memorial. And he said he learned from the Hiroshima atomic bomb museum. This museum was first, many people objected to have memorial of this damaged memorial. I think the dome, the Hiroshima dome. But years later, more people were feeling that we should have such object for telling the future, what happened. So time is really important. The 1 year after, or 5 years after, 10 years after, 30 years after, we have to think about the future, a longer term also. So that what Mr. Hirakawa did was to wait for a while until certain decision is made. So quick decision may not be a good sometimes. So that's something I learned for the two common things from this trip, the important things.
Thank you, Professor Ono. I think these two things are very, very important, and also these are very challenging for even us in universities and academia researchers. So you also mentioned about Buildback Better in your presentation. So I think you showed us good examples and the practices of Buildback Better in your presentation. So in terms of Buildback Better, which is the key to success, for the success and also to implement that goal?
Yeah, I think so far the consensus building for recovery, that's important matter. The many levels, community level, neighbors level, community level, like a local government level or national government level. There are many levels of making decision on something or on Buildback Better. What is the most suitable? It's very difficult to find one solution. We were automatically having many voices. How to make consensus? Then if too fast to make a decision, that may not be a good Buildback Better, not a Buildback Better. Maybe Buildback can be worse. So the timing, I think the one point is the timing of making a decision, having a consensus, and people's opinion changes, as I said. So that's a difficulty and important, but it's difficult. And at least when some disaster happen in next time somewhere else, this timing should be considered when making consensus. People's mindset changes over time, so it has to be in considered for making some decisions. So that I would say that timing for the consensus and timing is very important element for Buildback Better.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Ono. And we have one more question. Yeah. And the work project is the great and helps to deepen understanding of the recovery process. So then after the 11 years, both from a social and economic perspective, it's really great, your initiative. So do you think the work on keeping on the memory alive and integrating the understanding and knowledge of the recovery process into local culture to ensure a long-term memory for future will become more and more important? How can this be ensured to take place? I think this is all of us. Challenges in.
I share I have such concern. The people forget things. I think it's okay. We forget. If we have a tough time, we have a big sorrow moment, we try to forget naturally. That's fine. I think not everything should be kept in memory. I think people forget things, but there are something we should not forget. I think there's a distinction, like human nature is forgetting something. But if we have something not to forget, unforgettable things, like a disaster, in this 2011 March 11, something happening here. So that should be a memory shared by many people, like a personal memory who lost husband and wife or family members. That we shouldn't, public or the government shouldn't touch too much on that. That's a personal issue. But more common things, when we made a decision on the building seawalls or the communities, with location of the evacuation centers and so on. Those should be kept under so I think we should distinguish something we should remember, commonly remember, and something we shouldn't maybe touch on. Some maybe natural selection should be implemented. We should divide. Then we should use effort, resource to not to forget something, what happened. Not to memorize everything for the future generation. That's impossible. So we should be selective, and community. It's a decision to be conducted by at the community level or government level or whatever the level. That's my view. The memorization for the disaster.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Ono. And also in the presentation, you raised and addressed a very, very important information about the Bosai Forum next year. So can you elaborate a little bit about that one,
yes,
and also provide the information?
Thank you very much. This World Bosai Forum is not like a UN meetings. Everybody can be registered. Everybody is welcome. And we are focusing on this is not a scientific meeting, academic meeting, not only that. Many kinds of people come, the academia, local governments, private sector, even the citizens, normal citizens, non-expert. So we want to have this mixed atmosphere of many people to come up with share with pragmatic solutions to disaster risk reduction. So then we have many 90 minutes sessions, and we have exhibitions of the ideas. We have a personal presentation. We have poster sessions, and there's some similar as other international conferences. But it's focusing on the Tohoku experiences, not only by that, but mainly what we experienced to disseminate other part of the world. And we welcome everybody's participation.
Okay, and also I understand that during that forum, and you planned a lot of visiting and
yes,
visit and tour, field tour.
That's right.
If people are interested in those areas you introduced today, so they should come to that forum, right?
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Izumi-sensei. That's a very good of you to mention that. So we will try to make a good course for the field trip course, and including visiting the places I introduced during this walk, and the picking maybe a good course, because it's maybe difficult for foreigners to go by themselves. So we will make a tour to certain selected sites for a study tour excursion course. So we welcome your participation for that as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Ono, for your very, very interesting presentations and also introduction of the World Bosai Forum. So we're really looking forward to welcome all of you to that forum. Thank you very much, Professor Ono.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now I'd like to welcome to our second speaker, Dr. Julia Gersten. She is an associate professor at the Disaster Culture and Digital Archive Division of the Irides Tohoku University. And she received her PhD in Japanese studies with a disciplinary focus in social anthropology at Freie University Berlin in 2019. Her dissertation explored the ambiguity of kizuna, human bonds, and the role of local culture in community building after the 3.11 disasters in Fukushima and Miyagi. Her main research interests include cultural and collective memory of disasters in Japan, the handling of negative heritage, and social ties after 3.11 disaster. So thank you very much, Professor Yuria, your participation today. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I'm still assistant professor, but thank you very much for the promotion. Today I'm actually talking about a similar topic to that was just introduced by Professor Ono. So Professor Ono already talked about some of the disaster heritage sites that can be seen along his Bosai walk. And today I'm going to focus on school disaster memorials and their role in disaster education after the 2011 Great East Japan earthquake. So I think I don't have to say much about the Great East Japan earthquake anymore, but yeah, I guess most of you remember the triple disaster that consists of a magnitude 9 earthquake, the tsunami, and the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant disaster. And we also just have seen in Professor Ono's presentation how much the landscape changed, not only through the disaster, but also within the recovery process. So we heard about these massive seawalls that have been built, and coastal communities have been relocated on elevated ground or on higher ground elsewhere. So yeah, the landscapes changed a lot also through the recovery process. But of course, especially in Fukushima prefecture, there are also still many areas where there's still a very long way to recovery. So the picture that you can see on the bottom right side is from Tomioka town, and I took this just 2 weeks ago, where you can still see the damage from 11 years ago, since these buildings were in the exclusive or exclusion zone where people were not allowed to enter. And some of these areas are going to be opened this year, actually. So the question is, how can we pass on the memories of the disaster, or also what is often referred to as lessons learned in Japan, to future generations? And in Japan, this has been tried to be done a lot by preserving buildings that show traces of the disaster as so-called disaster heritage sites. On the right side, you can see such a building. On the left side, there was also a building preserved as a disaster heritage site. But that picture I decided to show you also because you can see this tsunami height plate, the little blue mark on top of the building. And yeah, such buildings can be seen across the Tohoku area, as also shown by Professor Ono in the presentation. So such sites can be also called negative heritage. And here I'm referring to a definition by Meskel, who says that negative heritage is a conflictual site that becomes a repository of negative memory in the collective imaginary. As a site of memory, negative heritage occupies a dual role. So it can be either mobilized for positive didactic purposes, or alternatively be erased if such places cannot be culturally rehabilitated and thus resist incorporation into the national imaginary. So this is what we often see after wars, for instance. But in Japan, the main focus has been on this didactic purpose of preserving heritage sites. And the importance of preserving such sites has been already emphasized just several months after the disaster in 2011 as the first principle of the 7 principles for the reconstruction framework. And there it was stated that we, so the Japanese people, shall record the disaster for eternity, including through the creation of memorial forests and monuments, and we shall have the disaster scientifically analyzed by a broad range of scholars to draw lessons that will be shared with the world and passed down to posterity. And so this led to this huge movement of preserving so-called disaster heritage sites. So each disaster-hit municipality could kind of propose one site to be preserved. But in addition, we have also seen this huge, almost movement of building new disaster museums. So each prefecture has like one prefectural disaster museums, but then also many smaller museums that tell the stories of what happened in 3/11 in these localities. But of course, not everything can be preserved, because then reconstruction would not be possible. So the question is, what is preserved and what not? And also the preservation process is a very delicate process, as it may also lead to a divide between community members. For instance, when some people want to preserve such sites that show the tsunami or disaster damage, because it is important to kind of pass on the memories to not repeat such tragedies again. But then, of course, there are also community members who might have lost family members at these places and who simply don't want to see these places everywhere. Sakaguchi also pointed out in her dissertation that in some communities, people would feel ashamed by preserving places where people died, because it kind of emphasized the mistakes they did in evacuation, for instance. But other scholars have pointed out, in addition, that such preservation can also make a positive contribution to mental and social recovery. And this is also something that Professor Ono just pointed out, because like preserving these sites also gives people the opportunity to talk about their experiences. So after the disaster, also the so-called Densho Road was founded, that kind of tries to kind of streamline some of the activities around these disaster memorial facilities, and also kind of record them or archive them and present them on websites so that people can learn about these sites to begin with. And they as well define disaster memorial facilities mainly with this didactic purpose that has been pointed out by Meskel. So they say these are facilities for understanding lessons from the disaster, facilities that contribute to understanding of disaster prevention and preparedness, understanding the horror of disasters and fearsomeness of nature. They have historic or academic value, and they also communicate the facts of the disaster and lessons learned from it. So this is, again, this very didactic take on it. And so these are numbers from last year, but these have even grown. So there are more than 160 so-called tsunami plates that I have shown you before, that kind of show you the height of the tsunami. And in addition, there are also museums, exhibits, memorials, disaster ruins, and recovery parks. There's so many that Little John speaks of a museumification of the Tohoku areas. But today, I want to focus on memorial school buildings. So even if we just look at the disaster museums, so buildings that have been either built new to host exhibitions, or disaster ruins that have been preserved and turned into museums. So they also host an exhibition, for instance. We can see that the ones in yellow are former school buildings. So each prefecture by now has one school building as a disaster heritage site, and some of them have been also introduced in Professor Ono's presentation, and Miyagi has several ones. So the question is, why do we have so many preserved school buildings, and also how, like, what can people learn there, and how do they kind of distinguish these buildings as museums? So like one of the answers to this question is more or less simple, because school buildings in Japan are usually built very stable. So they withstand many hazards, such as typhoons, of course, but also earthquakes. So, and the tsunami. So many of the school buildings were still left intact, but could also at the same time show some of the damage they experienced in the disaster. So it was possible to preserve them in a way that you can still see the impact of the disaster and learn from it, but it is also safe for visitors to enter them. And another reason is that schools already belong to the municipality, so they don't have to kind of buy them new. And this also led to what interviewers referred to as a kind of fair way of preservation, because that way there was no decision to be made why, for example, a certain company was allowed to preserve their building, or family A could preserve something while another person was not able to do so. So in that way, it was pretty clear like who could preserve something and who would not be able to do so. But I think besides that, schools also have many other symbolic meanings and functions in society or communities. So especially in Japan, schools are usually the center of the community. So they are connected to community festivals and events. The children would usually participate in many events, or the schools would organize such events. Many people have memories connected to the place, either because they themselves went to these schools, or maybe their children or grandchildren did so. They might have attended some of these events. So the schools are very connected to the place and have a very symbolic meaning also for the place identity. And then they are usually also centers for disaster education, of course, because the children are educated about disasters there. But they also conduct many evacuation drills and serve as evacuation shelters in times of disaster. And interestingly, even as memorials, they still sustain some of these functions. So post-disaster, they might remain centers of the affected communities, because people might go there to offer flowers or pay their respects. Many memorial events are held at these places. And now I would like to introduce very quickly 3 of the many school examples. And we heard that in Miyagi Prefecture alone, there are already 5 preserved school memorials, but now I want to talk about 3 of them if we have the time. So one of the first so-called Shinsaiko, or disaster heritage sites, that was open to the public was the Arahama Elementary School that belongs to Sendai. Arahama Elementary is about 700 meters away from the coast, and in that community about 2,200 people used to live in Arahama district. And if you look at that picture, you can actually see a group of people who have evacuated to the rooftop of the school. And yeah, so about 320 people were saved on the day of the tsunami in that school. So not just the school children, but also local residents who were close by. Nobody who evacuated to the school died. So it was decided to preserve the school as a good evacuation example, also because the principal of that school decided to evacuate everyone to the rooftop and not to the gymnasium that you can see behind the school that was originally meant to be the evacuation site. So Arahama Elementary opened as a memorial in April 2017, and it hosts permanent but also temporary exhibitions, including videos and emergency goods. So people can actually go there and check what kind of goods you should prepare for hazards of different kinds. So this is what the Arahama area looked like several days after the disaster. On the right-hand side, you can see a picture that was taken from the rooftop on March 12th, so one day after the disaster. And now, as I said, the school has been preserved as a memorial. In a way, it's preserved in a different kind than the other schools, because a lot of the debris has been cleared, and instead you can see what the school looked like after the disaster just on pictures. But in addition, you have these Bosai or disaster mitigation exhibitions. So the exhibition is a combination of what life used to be before the Great East Japan earthquake and risk education. And the theme is about the 27 hours until the rescue of all evacuees. So they really focus on this time frame. So the pictures and videos show you what the place looked like before the disaster, but then also in the immediate aftermath of the tsunami. Yeah, with Arahama, the lessons learned are kind of presented very straightforward. So it's clearly told that after an earthquake, you have to evacuate to higher ground and you have to react quickly. In contrast to that, Nakahama Elementary in Yamamoto Town, also Miyagi Prefecture, has a little bit different take on presenting these lessons because they want to confront the visitors rather with questions. So they're not telling right away what you have to do, but visitors kind of have to imagine what kind of decisions the teaching staff and the students had to take on that day. And what is interesting about that school is also that it was already investing a lot in disaster mitigation before the 3/11 disaster. So when it was built, the ground of the school was raised by 2 meters. And in addition, a staircase was placed to the school outside of the school so that people close by could evacuate to the school even in times when the school is closed. And if you look at the picture, you can also see the blue plate, and guides would always point out that it might have been these additional 2 meters that actually saved all of the 90 people who evacuated on the rooftop. In that school, a lot of the debris is preserved in the way it was right after the earthquake and tsunami, and additional information is presented on plates and text on the walls. And as I said before, the answers to what to do in case of an earthquake or tsunami are not presented right away, but people would have to think about what they would do. Like, for example, imagine a tsunami would occur now. Would you evacuate to the mountains, or would you go to the rooftop? What would you do if the tsunami was higher than expected? And things like that. And also, the visitors are challenged to kind of imagine what the children went through on that day. For example, they are taken to the rooftop where on the day of the tsunami, there was no electricity. So even now, the rooftop is kept dark, and people are provided only with torch lights to kind of think about what they would do in such a scenario. The last example that I would like to present again is very different from not only from the other 2 schools, but from many of the disaster heritage sites in general, because Okama Elementary actually presents a site that is very closely connected to death, whereas most of the other disaster heritage sites present places of successful evacuation. So different to the other schools, Okama Elementary in Ishinomaki City is pretty far away from the sea. It's about 4 kilometers from the sea. And this is also why there was not a lot preparation for tsunamis or tsunami drills conducted at the school. But Okama is also located directly next to a river, to the Kitakami River, that on the 11th of March carried the tsunami inland and led to the death of 74 children and 10 school staff. And what has been criticized a lot is that although the school is next to a hill that is also very easy to climb, the group evacuated way too late. So they waited for almost an hour on the school grounds and then evacuated right in the incoming direction of the tsunami. So also the disaster manual did not list any designated evacuation places, but instead just said evacuate to an open space nearby. So there was a lot of confusion in the aftermath. And the preservation process of the school was really difficult because of the tragedy that happened there. So Ishinomaki City for a long time was against the preservation of the school, also because it represents questions of responsibility and shame. And then also some of the local community members did not want to be confronted with this tragedy, of course. But in the end, a group of bereaved parents and also some of the surviving school children fought for the preservation of the school. And in 2016, it was decided that the school would not be demolished. And last year, finally, the school was opened as a museum. but very different to the other museums. The school itself does not present an exhibition inside the school building, but guides who are mostly the surviving bereaved parents of the children who died would take the visitors around the school and talk about life in that area, and then also about the time the children spent there and the problems with the evacuation practice. So in contrast to the other sites at Okawa, people are challenged to learn from the mistakes that were done at these sites. So to sum up, we have seen now 3 examples of the many examples of like schools or school ruins as disaster heritage sites. And we have also seen the difficulties of keeping memories alive more than 11 years after the disaster. But with the many school buildings, we can also say that school ruins kind of still preserve some of their functions as learning sites and centers for the communities. We have seen that there are different educational approaches to how to tell the stories of the disaster, and that these buildings are also used as an emotional disaster education, educational purposes. And in general, they kind of also show the importance of preserving diverse experiences, although these sites are very similar. And these are my references. And I think with this, I would like to close my presentation. And if we have time, I would be really happy to answer some questions.
Thank you so much, Yulia Sensei, for your very insightful presentations with also a lot of photos. And you highlighted the differences of each facility. So that was very, very interesting and good learning for all of us. So I have a couple of questions for your the talk. And I think one of the challenges of these remains and facilities is that to keep the conditions, for long term in the future. So how the local government and municipalities and people in the communities help each other to keep a good condition and preserve those important facilities for long term?
Oh, this is a very difficult question and also a very challenging one, because much of the funding is linked to the recovery agency that was supposed to end after 10 years. But now it was kind of prolonged, but in the long term, this is one of the major challenges. And some facilities decided to take like a little amount of entrance fees, which is of course also used for the preservation of these sites. And as I said before, most of the schools mostly belong to the cities. So they are also involved in financing them. But another problem is also the long-term sustaining guidance of these areas. So in many schools rely on disaster survivors to work as kataribe. And I think in many cases for a long time this was done for free, but of course then the question is like who can do this? Then it would be mostly like elderly people who have retired, because younger people have their own jobs or need to rely on other resources. So I know that there's a movement to kind of try to make this also a profession, or at least to pay people a little bit more. But in the long term, like not only the physical preservation, but then also like sustainably running these places is very challenging.
Yeah, thank you, Yulia Sensei. Yeah, I totally understand the difficulties. But when I visited those facilities, I also met some guys of the junior high school students who are doing that kind of volunteer work during the weekend and introduced the facilities and their experiences into the for their visitors. That was really impressive, and also the foreigners and whom I visited together, they were also very, very impressive. So that I think that kind of participation of the youth and young people are also encouraging. I think what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think maybe that was in Kesen Numa. So Kesen Numa has a very interesting take on that, because they have a kind of Katadibe club that where young people are encouraged to learn how to interact with visitors, not just with Japanese visitors, but also with visitors from abroad. And there has been also discussions about educating young people who have not directly experienced the disaster to become like second generation Katadibe, to kind of learn and tell people about the disaster at these sites.
Yeah, thank you so much. And also, I have heard some comments from the people abroad. They do not have those kind of facilities in their countries, although they really think it's very important and useful to keep their memories. So, what is your understanding of the this kind of utilize these facilities in abroad and foreign countries?
Yeah, I think that kind of links to what Professor Ono has said, that time is very important. So of course, in order to facilitate recovery and reconstruction, we can't keep like all of these damaged buildings. But then in many cases, well, I think in general, it is important to preserve some of these buildings to keep telling about the disasters. But not only disasters, it's also wars, for instance. So when we think about negative heritage in a broader term in Europe, it's mainly war heritage that has been discussed also academically. And there, I think one of the important lessons is to not kind of be stuck to saying that shameful experiences should not be told, but in contrast, it is exactly negative experiences from what we need to learn. So also in that sense, I think it's might be very costly to make these preservation efforts, but in the long term, I think it's a very important goal for understanding not only disasters or natural hazard induced disasters, but in general negative experiences.
Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Yuria. And I think that, as you mentioned, the preserve the memories has both ways, but negative and positive ways. But we believe that's a good thing to pass on our memories in the future. So I hope we can learn more about your research in the future on the progress, that kind of the preservation of the memories and also the learning. Thank you so much, Dr. Yuria.
Thank you so much too.
Okay, that is all for today's session, and I'd like to express our sincere appreciation to both speakers, Professor Ono and Dr. Yuria, for the excellent presentations. Also, thank you to all the audience and participants who joined us today's session. I hope you learned about recovery efforts from GEJET. Please be informed that the recording and the slides of this session will be shared on the APRU website. So for organizing this webinar, as usual, I'd like to thank to my staff in this Tohoku University and also APRU International Secretariat in Hong Kong. And after April, APRU and Multi-Hazards Program continue to organize series of events, and I hope we will see you again at one of these events in person, ideally. And I do not think we will organize the summer school this year either. However, next year we hope welcome you to Sendai at the summer school. And the good news in that we plan to organize the annual symposium physically in Bangkok in November. So it will be hosted by Chulalongkorn University. More details will be updated in the APRU website in the near future. So again, and as Dr. Ono mentioned, please do not forget we will organize the World Bosai Forum in March next year, 1 year from now. So I hope you can plan to visit Japan and us in March next year. So once again, thank you for your participation today and have a great day and have a good night. And thank you for Professor Ono and Dr. Yuria. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.